Hi, everyone. I'm Tanda. Welcome to this Debating Africa debate. Today, we're hosting a live debate on a topic that tends to get people a little riled up. Should we have a borderless Africa? Today, our participants are split into two opposing teams, and we'll enter the arena of opinions on this topic, arguing for and against borders. Both teams have prepared arguments based on three major points and will receive a maximum of 2 minutes for each point and 2 minutes for a single rebuttal argument. Arguing in the affirmative, we have Idris and Eze, I hope I'm saying that correctly, from Royal Rhetorics, Nigeria. And on the opposing side is Alfie and Victor from Spoken Arts Debate Society in Kenya. My colleague Grace will be keeping track of the time for us to ensure there's no funny business. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's start with the first question directed at Royal Rhetorics, Team 4, a borderless Africa. How would a borderless Africa drive economic growth and continental integration? Take it away.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it is very sad that in Africa today, we have a resource production paradox. To an extent where most of African countries are very rich in a lot of the natural resources you have that make up a lot of crucial products in the world today, but we cannot build capacity. For example, cobalt in the DRC, for example, gold in South Africa, for example, agricultural products and cash products in West Africa. What a borderless Africa would do is that it would help us build our capacity and defeat that resource production paradox that we face as Africans. Why is this true and why do we know this? Because what a borderless Africa would do is to integrate these nations together to face similar economic challenge, and it would give these nations a common interest. And that common interest would be to drive the growth and capacity of their countries. The problem you have within the current African states is that some states are impaired, such as the DRC, right? And that's why the imperialistic forces can come there and exfiltrate resources excessively using cheap labor and etc. In a situation whereby you have a country like DRC merging with superpowers in Africa like Nigeria, not only would that help the perception of the Western forces to know that they cannot just invade such a country because now you have a singular entity of countries meshed together. So at the end of the day, we think that when these countries come together and merge themselves without borders, it gives us a single economic
Time's up. Sorry, Idris.
To build capacity. Thank you very much, everyone.
Such beautiful statements, though. Really, really well done there. Okay, let's move to Spoken Arts Debate Society. How would you argue against that? What are the potential drawbacks of borderless Africa? Continental integration comes with structural challenges, of course, and security implications. Take it away.
I'll describe borderless Africa as just one word, anarchic, because of three reasons. Number one, governance structures and institutions. Number two, security. And number three, diversity. I'll start with governance structures and institutions. We know Africa, we live in Africa, so we actually know the governance here and the structures and institutions. As Africa, we don't have this. So under this, we have corruption, we have literacy levels are low, we have the fact that all are we able to live, let alone the nationality and sovereignty of our own countries. Number three, we have different currencies. Number four, we have no transparency. Everyone, it's realism. Come on, people. Every state has its own interest. Number two, I'll talk about security. Things such as xenophobic attacks, things such as insurgency, traffic expanding. Just the other day in South Africa, we had xenophobic attacks. South Africans, they want Zimbabweans in South Africa. And this is literally in Africa. Now imagine if you just remove those borders. Do you think the integration will be there? And I see my time is almost up, so I'll go to diversity. We have different languages, we have different ethnicities, we're literally totally different people. Now imagine putting all these people together. I think it will just happen like Rwanda and in the Rwanda genocide, we just had two tribes, Hutu and Tutsi, and look at what they did to the country. Now imagine We have the Kikuyus in Kenya, we have the Igbos in Nigeria, we have Yoruba, you have Tuaregs. Imagine how that world will actually look like. I don't think we'll be able to maneuver the difference, the diversity in Africa. Yeah, and I have never been prouder to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Well done. This was so much fun. Okay, let's move back to very strong arguments made there by the other team. Let's hear what you have to say. A lot of people say that we can learn from the EU, which has more than 20 European countries as signatories of the Schengen area, and we could use this model for a border-free Africa. How would this work in practical terms, according to you?
Great. So I'm just going to say that the EU example is a perfect rebuttal for my opponent here today, because the assumption that diversity is a problem is actually very, very flawed and unproven. Take for example, if their argument were to be true, Nigeria would not be functioning as a state for the past 60 years or thereabout, because there are about 200 ethnic cities in Nigeria essentially. So if we needed to create countries and create borders essentially because of our ethnic lines, then we would have 200 countries out of Nigeria essentially. Same thing applies in every other part of Africa. There isn't necessarily a cultural homogeneity that exists in any country in Africa. Most African states have, a diversity, issue in terms of ethnicity and in itself, which then means that the actual solution has to be one that is political, right? It means that we need to come together as a people and find political solutions to these sort of problems that they have identified. And the European Union is a perfect example of that. People in England don't speak the same language as people in France, but we've never seen that the European Union didn't work specifically because of these sort of diversities in themselves. I think that when you would have a borderless Africa, it doesn't mean we're going to have a non-controlled Africa. It doesn't mean we're going to have a chaotic Africa. It simply means that we're going to have a different sort of government that we aspire to. One wherein we don't just see ourselves as citizens of Nigeria or citizens of Zimbabwe, but we see ourselves as citizens of this entity called Africa in itself. Take, for example, the ECOWAS, which is like a very miniature example of what we're expecting to happen. ECOWAS has had a very successful outing in terms of being borderless. It means that with my passport from Nigeria, for example, I can travel through Togo, Benin Republic, Ghana, etc., without having to pay for visas. Yeah, it means that my transportation of goods between these countries is essentially quite easier. So ultimately, if we can do it in West Africa, I don't see a reason why we can't upscale these things to the rest of Africa in themselves.
Enough time. Well argued, perfectly argued, both sides, very compelling. Okay, let's move right back to this EU question. Is it a fair comparison? How would you challenge the idea that the same model could work for Africa, spoken arts debate society?
The first disparity that makes us question this comparison is the level of development. All of the EU countries are first world, or as we call them, developed nations. That is a massive contrast to the situation that we currently face here in Africa. It means when you conglomerate all these nations, they are as strong as their weakest link. When Greece was going through its economic problems, when Germany was taking in refugees, it meant the whole of Europe had to pay not only for the benefits that their decisions led according to the countries, but also for their negatives. That problem is much more significant within the setting of our borders, because if we are indeed as strong as our weakest link, that means it is more likely to have a situation where we're being dragged down as opposed to lifted up, given the development levels of countries here. However, if we were to concede that it is indeed, for whatever reason, a fair comparison of these 20 countries versus the 55 countries that we have here in Africa, then the EU itself has significant issues that we feel would be exacerbated within the settings of Africa. For example, sovereignty of nations. The local governments really do want to keep power as much as possible. And then considering the different ideologies that each countries follow based on their cultures and based on their fundamentals, we feel like this causes more of a clash than it does solve a problem. I think 55 nations, too many cooks spoil the broth. The second issue here is the currency. Most of the European countries moved to the euro. Can we as Africa implement something as significant as that? Do we have the structural means? Do we have the do we even want to do so? And then finally, we have the issue of politics. When we open up our borders, it means all the regional problems become continental problems. And are we willing to deal with that? This is where we have an issue with the comparison.
Beautiful sentiments. Victor and Elsie really driving home the point that diversity is a huge thing to overcome. And which brings us back to the final question for Royal Rhetorics. How do you respond to the assertion that the kind of illegal or irregular immigration that could emerge from a lack of borders could potentially destabilize stronger economies? Is this a valid argument at all? And how would you challenge it?
We think that in a borderless Africa, what we would likely have is more documented and recorded immigrants. The problem with Africa today and immigration is that people do not want to go through the normal coasts within borders. Why? Because there is a huge paranoia for states to want to reject immigrants. We think that in a borderless Africa where we see ourselves as one entity, it then means that people who want to migrate from one country to another, or from one region within Africa as a country to another region, will be able to do so freely and with documentation. What it means is that it becomes easy for the central government to position these people into various sectors within the new economy we are trying to build. The problem today is that you have is that if I'm a Nigerian and because I want to live in Nigeria and I want to go to South Africa, I likely won't go through the normal borders you have in places like the Western Cape or etc. I would want to go through the forest and enter South Africa and be an undocumented immigrant and do menial jobs. But when you have Africa as a single entity, we can now take into account each immigrant because immigrants will no longer see the state as having a paranoia of rejecting them because we have now become more accommodative. It then means we can expand our outreach to almost everyone who desires to live from one region to another while providing suitable jobs for them. Even though these jobs might be menial, at least they know that they can have something to do, which means at the end of the day, immigration doesn't really become a problem because it's no longer immigration. It's just like migration, right? From one place to another. It's not as if you're a foreigner in another person's land. You're technically within your own land because Africa is now a country and you want to change your environment. So we don't think immigration will totally be an issue, but we think whoever wants to migrate will even help the economy boom because we now have documented migration within the new African space.
Perfect. So much. And I have to say that this is the big contention when people argue this topic is it valid to say that people would migrate illegally or in an irregular fashion more with borders, or would removing them make people, as you've just argued, more willing to formalize their movements? Both very strong arguments. Okay, let's move to the final team, the last question for Spoken Arts Debate Society. A mass influx of economic migrants to stronger economies. Is it a possibility? Do we have the governance and infrastructure to manage these potential movements? Please take it away.
First of all, forgive my pessimism, but if the EU has issues with immigration, for example, vehicular attacks, terrorist attacks in Paris in 2015, and North America, also developed nations for the most part, also has issues with immigration. Forgive my pessimism, but I really do think that we have to consider this a massive concern. So not only is it a possibility, we believe it's an inevitability. That there will be, for easier terms, brain drain, whereby human capital and the most sort of productive human capital moves and gets concentrated into the economic powerhouses. We've seen this on a national level, whereby most African countries have rural areas that are pretty much marginalized in terms of investments, in terms of attention by the government, in favor of cities. Here in Kenya, we have not only the cities that exist now, but also the upcoming cities. Those are the places that are getting most of the funding, whereas places where people are immigrating out of become marginalized. We find that this is going to lead to a concentration in economic powerhouses, such as, for example, Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, whatever, and marginalization. And this becomes a vicious cycle because the more concentration, the more investment happens there, the more countries want to do so. And even if we do want to curb these or mitigate these infrastructural issues that do exist, there is an opportunity cost thereof. As we've said, we're developing nations, which means resources are scarce. We have to use them very efficiently. Is a country that's paying dues to this, whatever, borderless Africa, going to spend money to curb immigration to their country? Is, for example, Kenya, which is getting all these economic benefits from the borderless Africa. Do they have the incentive to invest in creating structures that stops actively something that is benefiting their economy? We feel like this won't happen, and that is why we feel like this is a problem and the biggest problem.
Hands up. Thank you. Thank you to both teams for very, very strong and very compelling arguments across all three questions. We're going to give you time now to gather yourselves and prepare your final rebuttal arguments. We will give you 2 minutes to figure it out, and then we'll be back to present that. Okay, thank you, teams. We're back. Our debaters have one last chance to argue their side and convince you at home whether Africa should do away with borders or not. We'll kick things off with our opposing team, Spoken Arts Debate Society, and then Royal Rhetorics straight after. Spoken Arts Debate Society, please take it away.
I'm going to talk about 2 rebuttals. Number 1, transportation, and number 2, diversity. So we'll start with transportation. As I've earlier said, EAC and EU actually tried to implement this by introducing the EAC passport, that you can actually move around the country with the EAC passport, and there's like be no visa requirement, you just move freely. But did this actually work? It goes back to our first point. The structures and the institutions are not there to actually implement this transportation. And let's say best case scenario for government's case, the transportation actually works. It will be one-sided. Again, what my partner told you, we'll be moving from Kenya, like you'll be moving from a less developed country to an equally developed country, which means transportation is actually one-sided. Number 2, diversity. They're trying to say that diversity actually brings us together, and I'm saying no. We've just look at Africa. We have Chad. We have the country Chad. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Pleasure. Whenever you're ready, Victor.
Yeah, let me see if I can flip this camera over to this side. Am I sufficiently audible? It's up to you guys.
Very much so.
Perfect. We'll set the timer for 1 minute. I will begin in 3, 2, 1. Make no mistake about it. We are supporters of diversity. However, understanding diversity means there are differences for which we have to overcome if we have to head in the same direction and sort of conglomerate all our nations. The first issue that we have with all of propositions arguments is, 1, are our interests indeed common? Given the differences in culture, ideologies, beliefs, even the way we do things, are our interests really common, considering there are 55 nations, both with varying levels of development and different objectives that they're trying to achieve? Second of all, if they are indeed common and we somehow find a way to mutualize all our interest, are people willing to implement the same strategies to go about achieving these things? Again, based on the political leanings, the different ideologies within nations. Third of all, if we are indeed going to do so, are we capable of doing it given the infrastructure and the structures that we exist in? We believe no, and government has to show us exactly, put us more in a positive headspace.
Well argued, guys. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Okay, let's move on to Royal Rhetorics. Let's put on a good fight, eh? Let's go.
So guys, pay attention to the inconsistent logic of the guys on the other side. Yeah, they say, well, if France is going through some sort of problem because of immigrants, then we are going to be very pessimistic because it's going to happen. But when it comes to the benefits, they are no longer optimistic. Yeah, because if their logic is consistent, we should say, well, if France is also booming economically, then that sort of result is also supposed to replicate here. So why is it that we're able to replicate the results that are negative, but you don't think that we're able to replicate the positive results in those instances? I'll leave the people who are judging to do that. But let me give you a very quick example in terms of GDP comparatives. I think that the GDP of South Africa, for example, is over 5,000 USD. Yeah, GDP per capita. Yeah, the people who were bigger than as a country, that's That's bigger than Moldova, which is about 3,300. That's bigger than Ukraine. That's bigger than Albania. That's bigger than North Macedonia. The idea that Africa is, ultimately always going to be poorer than people outside Africa is very, very false. And finally, we think on the issue of diversity, if we can be able to manage West Africa like ECOWAS, and we've been able to manage our countries in Nigeria ultimately, then we believe that we're more than able to manage a diverse Africa.
Thank you to both our teams. Very, very strong arguments on both sides. I don't even know. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe you at home can decide. And indeed, we're going to ask you to decide, should we have a borderless Africa? Our participants today have made such compelling arguments on either side. Thank you so much for taking part in this discussion, guys. We will continue this conversation. Perhaps next time we'll bring in a policymaker. Certainly, if you have a perspective you'd like to share, let us know in the comments, either on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or our online platform on debating.africa. We'll welcome comments, suggestions, and ideas on this and other Africa topics. If you like this kind of format, this live debate, please let us know and we'll do more. We really want to get those youth voices in from across the continent. And clearly from today's demonstration, they have such incredible things to say. Give young Africans a platform and they will blow your socks off. And I think we have had that encounter today. Thank you guys so much. We will see you next time for another round, another battle. I can't wait. Until then, goodbye.